never did tell people that we were going live. Oh well.
Yes. Okay.
Did you tag me in something I could find?
It says we are live. I tagged you in a tweet.
Well, I see nobody follows me on Twitter much, frankly. I gotta get there. We go. Let's see.
Hi there, folks watching. By the way, we're
hi everybody watching. I'm about to tell other people that they can watch too.
That's right. We're behind the scenes here. AV Rant. Episode number 659. I think that's right. I'm losing count at this point. In any case, you are seeing the behind the scenes version if you're seeing this little intro, where this is our live broadcast recording. Let's see. The stream's current bitrate is higher than the recommended bitrate. Well, that's too bad, Google. You're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with it.
We're sorry. Your video's too good.
Excellent connection / warning. All right. Let's see. I think everything is set up here. That's there. Let's make sure my microphone is working just fine. Okay. So I think we're all right. We apparently are streaming. If you'd like the finished version, that'll come out later in the week. And these days, pretty much the only difference is that there's an intro, this beginning little stuff is cut out and the audio is cleaned up. And sometimes with the audio being cleaned up, the lip sync isn't right because since we're using Skype and OBS and like what's being recorded here isn't necessarily what we're individually recording audio perfect timing wise. And by the end of a 2-hour long video, the lips are slightly out of sync. So all kinds of fun stuff happens. But regardless, I think we're about ready.
It is a wonder this works.
At all.
I just said to my wife last night, even in 2019, it still amazes me that I just texted a guy across the continent in Vancouver to say that tomorrow we're going to look at each other on screens and record things for anyone in the world to watch or listen to.
And they can watch it essentially live. I mean, there's a very slight little delay going on here with the
That's pretty much live.
Stream. It's pretty darn close to real time. So, all right. I think I'm all set up. I'm the one who's going to start the darn podcast now. I don't have to tell Tom.
You are.
So here we go. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H, and this week I'm here with
Lee Overstreet, once again pinch hitting for Tom, filling in as he swirls in a hurricane, or hopefully not.
Well, yeah, so he said he's safe. This is Hurricane Dorian that is happening right now and potentially pelting the coast of Florida there, which is where Tom lives. Now, he said all these...
He's on the other coast.
Like, he should be okay. He should be fine. Yeah. However, the schools preemptively closed. Like they just said last week when they knew this would come, they're like, yeah, don't even consider coming in. So all of his kids are at home. His wife is at home. So he's like, yeah, you know what? Recording a podcast in the midst of all that and the new puppy and everything going on.
Oh, that's right. The new puppy. Yeah. At the time he made this decision, the cone of uncertainty for that hurricane looked like it was going to go to Florida and then sit on it like the great red spot of Jupiter for the rest of eternity. So it kind of made sense to do what he did.
So I had asked Lee already was it Saturday that I asked? Something like that.
Something like that.
It was during the weekend in any case, and I'm not going to renege on that invitation. So Lee is here, and thank you, Lee, for being here and guest co-hosting this week. We very much appreciate it.
You can always renege on me. I'm cool, man. If you took it away and brought it back, whatever. I'm easygoing.
Well, in case you're not familiar and this is your first time watching and everything seems weird to you, this is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We are a podcast that answers questions about home theater. And to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by sending it to question@avrant.com. That is our email address. That is by far the best way to reach us. So please email any questions you may have about home theater to question@avrant.com. You can, of course, come to our website, which is avrant.com, and leave a comment there. We seem to be sorting out some of our bandwidth issues, so that's good. And facebook.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to reach us on Facebook. You can also reach out to us individually. I am Rob@avrant.com. Tom is Tom@avrant.com. And we're all on Twitter. I am @FirstReflect. Tom is @AVRant_Tom. And Lee can be reached on Twitter as well, yeah?
Yes, you can, @LeeOvertweet. And people have found me there. I get a kick out of it. I can always just tell when I get a new follower, for some reason, just by the icon, just by their sort of picture, I go, yeah, that's AVRant, I bet. And I go look, and yeah, it's somebody, and they always, people that follow us always have something about electronics or computers or something in their profile.
Yep, we appeal to a certain type with a 2-hour-long podcast just talking about home theater.
Well,
that seems to be the case.
But that's the beauty of the internet. Whatever your thing is that you're into, there are a lot of other people also into it.
Spread all around the world.
It's
pretty darn cool. Well, we like to start out the podcast by thanking our listeners of the week, who are people who have supported this podcast in some way. One way you can do that is by coming to avrant.com, and over on the right-hand side on the desktop version, because if you're looking at the mobile version, you won't see it, so scroll down to the bottom of the mobile version and click desktop version if that's how you're viewing the website. But over on the right-hand side of the desktop version, there is a link that says Support AV Rant with a beautiful little cup of coffee image that Tom put together all by his little self, and that link will take you over to PayPal, where you can hand us out a one-time donation if you please, using your credit card or your PayPal account. I don't know if anybody has donated that way, because Tom is always the only person who ever sees anything on PayPal. So if anyone has donated that way, and I missed thanking you this week, you'll be thanked next week, not to worry.
Yeah, he's pocketing thousands and thousands and keeping it from you, Rob.
Doesn't seem to be the case, but one never knows. However, I'm not doing this for the money. But yes, the other financial way to support this podcast is on Patreon. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. And if you sign up there, it's an automatic monthly donation. You say the dollar amount you would like to donate every single month, and it will automatically be taken from your Patreon account. $1 per month is the minimum. So we have 86 patrons over there supporting us, and that's very nice to see. So thank you very much to everybody over there at Patreon.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
And sometimes people like to support this podcast in non-financial ways, which is awesome. We'd like to thank Carlton B., who is helping out Tom and Clint in the process of figuring out why our avrant.com website is exceeding our bandwidth limit every single month. And he's come up with some very good things in auditing of the website to figure that out. So much thanks to Carlton for that. That should help. That'd be nice.
Because the videos and the audio aren't served up from that website.
Nope,
right?
The audio is coming from Libsyn, the video is coming from YouTube, so that should not be part of our bandwidth. We have no idea what's happening, but Carlton seems to be on top of it, and that's very nice. And Terry G also talked us up to SVS. He went over to their outlet store during the Labor Day sale and grabbed himself a PC2000 subwoofer, so that is awesome. I'm sure you will enjoy that, Terry. I would also like to let a couple of other folks know. I haven't written their names down, but they did support the podcast and let me know. But I always cut everything that goes on our topic list for the week off on Sunday night, and they let me know about those things on Monday. So you guys will be thanked next week. Please don't worry that I'm leaving somebody out. Although, if something happened and I missed you, always let me know. Question@avrant.com, because I am certainly not trying to purposely overlook anybody.
We love everyone almost.
Yup. Pretty darn close.
Pretty close, especially if you're a listener or you're sending money or you're asking questions.
And if we don't love
you don't have to send money to ask a question.
Definitely not. If we don't love what you're saying, we might just, disable the comment section of that particular place. So,
like the entirety of YouTube.
Could be. So we're going to start off here with some news. And Lee, you like to read stuff, so why don't you let folks know what's happening? I love to read stuff.
I used to be on the radio.
That's right.
Yeah. Via Nick B. and Carl R. And we always have a lot of Carls. Mm-hmm. If your name is Carl, you just like electronics better. It's a fact. It's a science fact. Dolby has withdrawn their restriction regarding upmixing. Last year, they sent out a mandate that any new equipment would only be allowed to use Dolby upmixing on any Dolby signals or PCM signals derived from a Dolby signal. That would have meant, for example, that if you wanted to use the DTS Neural X upmixer to create front-wide channels, something that none of Dolby's upmixers do, you wouldn't be allowed to do so if the original signal was encoded in a Dolby format. DTS fought this mandate via the European Commission as anti-competitive. Isn't that interesting when something so technical makes it all the way up to like the European Commission or the U.S. Supreme Court?
Yep.
They fought it as anti-competitive, and combined with consumer backlash, that was enough to convince Dolby to withdraw their mandate. So feel free to continue cross-pollinating your upmixers.
Yep.
And also let this, be a lesson to all of us that, saying something, you feel like if you send an email or write some sort of correspondence, you feel like it just goes off into the ether. But notice that said consumer backlash.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how else do they know unless they hear from you? So, hey, you're sitting at the computer, type a note.
Well, I mean,
fire off an angry email.
Wouldn't they want Dolby's surround up mixer to be able to be used on regular PCM and DTS signals? Which, I mean, it would have been, but had this mandate gone through, I'm sure DTS would have reacted in kind and said, okay, well, fine then. You won't be able to use a Dolby up mixer on a DTS signal. I mean, they could have done a similar mandate, but instead, happily, things are basically staying the way they were, which is what we wanted. Use whatever up mixer you want on whatever signal you want. That's better, so happy to see that news.
There we go. Also via Nick B, Ascend Acoustics has added a new speaker model to their Sierra lineup, the Sierra Luna Duo. A second woofer is added to the compact Sierra Luna, giving the Luna Duo extremely similar output capabilities to the Sierra 2, but with a front-ported and slimmer form factor that allows for on-wall placement, or might be easier to place as a horizontal speaker. Pricing is initially $800 each, which is higher than the price of the original Sierra 2. So this is all about the form factor, something you have to need or want. But Dave Fabricant warns that prices on all Ascend speakers will have to be increased in the near future. So buy it now.
Yeah, kind of, a little bit. I mean,
did he add that to the end? So buy it now.
Not really. I mean, the thing is, he's been extremely fair because he's been saying for well over a year now, he's like, yeah, at some point we're going to need to increase our prices because their margins are very, very low over at Ascend. And of course, so interestingly, quite the assemblage of components that go into the Sierra Luna speakers is like each part is coming from a different company, basically. But of course, some of them are coming from China, and they will be subject to the new tariffs, then higher tariff prices that are coming in. So he's like, yeah, it's he's staved it off as long as he possibly could. He's going to have to increase prices at some point, which
that's happening to everyone. And the bigger the company, the more they've done some pre-orders probably and can handle the tariff increases. But smaller companies, places that do things on the fly, it's going to get rough.
But this is kind of a cool looking design. I mean, personally, I've been saying along, I don't really know that the Sierra Luna Duo is actually a necessary speaker because the Sierra Luna has been their wall mountable version, the slot ported, slim, about 6 inches from front to back design, and that's been their on-wall solution. And then if you needed a smaller center, well, you just turn a Sierra 2 sideways and that'll work. But lots of people have been requesting a higher output Luna that can be wall mounted, and that is exactly what the Luna Duo now offers.
There you go. Moving along via Infinite Gary. His name needs an echo at this point. Infinite Gary. Carl R. and J.A. All mentioned this. The UHD Alliance announced a partnership with several well-known Hollywood directors to introduce a filmmaker mode picture preset in TVs with the goal of preserving the filmmaker's intent. LG, Panasonic, and Vizio are on board. All forms of picture processing and motion smoothing will be deactivated, thank goodness, and correct aspect ratio, colors, grayscale, and frame rate will be preserved. Hot diggity. Key to all of this is that filmmaker mode can be activated by metadata in the content, and TVs that support it will include a dedicated button on the remote so that users don't have to dig through settings. I love this idea a lot because, I mean, to me, the ultimate is I want to see what the director and the cinematographer really meant for me to see.
Now, I mean, if
with some, exceptions, maybe my room is a bit bright and I have to, bump it up, but
yeah, no, I mean, if you have a TV that has an ISF picture mode or a THX picture mode, that is essentially what this is already. They're not inventing an entirely new idea as far as picture modes go, because the existing ISF and THX picture modes, and for the most part, even just what, if your TV doesn't have that, but it has a cinema mode or a movie mode, traditionally those have come pretty darn close to the industry standards as far as out-of-the-box settings goes. And when they
talk... It's that metadata, right? The metadata that's activating
to activate it automatic, that's new, and that's similar to like what was done with the Netflix calibrated mode or the IMAX enhanced mode. Both of those had a similar idea where there's some metadata involved that will automatically put your television into this picture mode. So this filmmaker mode, it's not really inventing anything new. What it's doing is making it either the default picture mode that just happens because the content already had the metadata in it to activate it, and or it's very simple to get to this picture mode. Because, I mean, out of the box, they'll probably still come in vivid mode or automatic brightness mode or something like that. The automatic brightness mode is becoming more and more common on TVs as the default picture mode because that's how they get the good Energy Star rating.
Right.
But to get an accurate picture mode, which would have been your ISF or your THX or even just your cinema or movie mode, now a single button press, a dedicated button on the remote that says filmmaker mode, and there you go. So, yeah.
Personally, I would like it where I could, even if it was deep in a menu, if I could go into a menu and say, anytime there's a director's metadata, go for it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to turn it on so that I don't have to hit a button and it just activates. That would be the ultimate for me.
That's how the Netflix calibrated mode and the IMAX enhanced mode both work now. You have the option of manually deactivating them so that they will ignore the metadata flag if it exists in the content. So I would imagine that would still be there, but like you'll probably have to dig through the settings to manually turn it off. That's sort of the whole idea. So it's like Scorsese and Christopher Nolan and several other directors, they're all on board with this, and we have these three manufacturers, LG, Panasonic, and Vizio so far. I'm kind of surprised Sony isn't there right now because Sony was the first with IMAX enhanced and Netflix calibrated mode, and this is right along the same line. So it wouldn't shock me one little bit if Sony joins this in the not too distant future. But there were actually some sort of questions related to this that I'll
That's
throw
right.
in there
We've kind of touched on this. Infinite Gary's a little confused as to whether it will actually be any different than what you'd get with a professional calibration. Is it just about adding another logo to the box to go beside IMAX enhanced? What if you want to change one setting? Would you have to exit filmmaker mode and lose everything that it does? I would hope not. I would like to think that I could tweak the filmmaker mode itself if I want to.
I mean, that's unknown at this point.
Right.
We don't know for sure. And for sure, you would want to have the ability to at least change, say, the brightness and contrast settings because those are ambient light dependent and you might not be in a pitch black room. I would imagine, well, I'm not even sure. I haven't used IMAX enhanced mode or Netflix calibrated mode, so I'm not sure how manually adjustable they are. I believe you can change those basic settings like brightness and contrast, so that would be the thing. I would expect that's probably possible, but, I mean, will it be different than what you would get with a professional calibration? No, this is going to be exactly the same as, what Netflix calibrated mode is, which is everyone who's tested it says, yeah, this is exactly the same as the ISF dark mode or the Cinema Pro mode, whatever the name they gave it for the most accurate mode. It's exactly the same. There's no difference there. So would it be any different? Well, a professional calibration would still be more accurate even than this. This is still a preset mode and won't be any different from ISF dark or Cinema Pro, whatever they name it. So yeah, that's fine. Is it just to add another logo? No, I can see where they're coming from. The button on the remote is the differentiating factor here. That's never been done before.
Right. How you activate it or deactivate it is very different. So now we're going to switch gears and talk about some goings on with OLED. And you mentioned Christopher Nolan a minute ago, and it just reminded me that this Friday, some friends of ours are coming over, and we're going to watch Interstellar in 4K HDR.
Nice.
And it's not available on Amazon Prime in 4K. It's only HD. It's not HDR either. And I couldn't find it on Netflix. So it was very frustrating. So my friend is bringing over an Apple TV 4K.
Yeah.
And we're just going to plug that in. And
the
see
iTunes
how it goes.
version is?
So yes, it's 4K HDR. He checked.
Cool.
And now I'm going to see if I can convince him he needs an OLED and that he needs a good surround sound system because he's kind of a sound bar guy. At their house is just sort of sound bar. So I'm going to blow his mind, and I think it's going to be really good.
There are some pretty decent Atmos and DTSX soundbars these days, but they're not inexpensive for the really good ones. And for the same,
that's not what he has.
For the same amount of money, you could probably put together a completely, bespoke speakers and subwoofer and receiver system, although wouldn't be as convenient to hook up. So,
but do you remember when my amplifier shut itself down? That whole thing, that was Interstellar.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so I have to stay at about minus 12.
Sustained very peak output levels. Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, because it's those low rumblings. Apollo 11 did it when the Apollo 11 spacecraft launched that Saturn V rocket sound. And Interstellar, the combination of all those synthesizers and low bass notes during part of it. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's when it's sustained that is the problem. Anyway, talking about OLEDs.
Yeah, so OLEDs. That was kind of a little sidetrack about OLED because I have an OLED and he's going going to come watch it. Construction of LG Display's OLED factory in China is complete. It will immediately start producing 55 and 65-inch panels because that's what they make the most of. Then in 2020, it'll start producing 77-inch and 48-inch panels. I think that's neato. Because I've been on some forums that have more European people than American people. And if you're in like England, people don't have living rooms that big.
That's right.
And it's just not tradition to have a gigantic TV like it is here in America. So they were complaining and they wanted smaller ones. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, they were saying how the mother glass that's being produced there is actually perfect for them to get, I think, 2 77-inch panels and 4 48-inch panels out of one sheet of mother glass. Something like that anyway.
That's geometry and math, yes.
That's why they're
let's see. Moving along, Vizio will launch their first OLED TV models in 2020, of course, using LG display panels. That now makes 16 brands, I didn't realize that, using LG display OLED panels. No one makes OLED panels, do they?
So at the moment, LG Display is the only game in town for large, TV-sized OLED panels.
Non-telephone.
Yeah, of course, there are the phone panels that are produced by several different companies, but that's a different technology altogether. So, at the moment, but the very next story, things might be changing on that front.
Might be. Samsung is halting LCD production in South Korea. All of it?
Yeah.
And transitioning those factories to QD-OLED production. So they got to fit that Q in there because it's Samsung.
Oh, yes.
You can't let go of it. You can't call it QOLED. So it's QD-OLED.
That's right. This is highly interesting because there was one model year, this was going back 4 years ago now, where Samsung did have an OLED TV that they brought out, and it was an RGB OLED. That means every single subpixel they had red, green, blue individual OLEDs for each pixel. And the reason why LG has managed to continue that, Samsung only did that for 1 year and they weren't able to continue. They turned their back on that and just went all LCD for the time being with quantum dots. But what LG did is instead of having red, green, blue, they just made all of the OLED, the individual little subpixels, white. And they actually put 4 of them for each pixel, and then there's just little color filters on top. So there's red, green, blue color filters, and then a white, clear, non-filtered OLED that goes through. So the red, green, and blue coming through the filters from these little individual white OLEDs that LG is making, those only produce maybe 300, 350 nits maximum. And to get to the 700-800 nit peaks that you get with HDR from an LG OLED, that's the white subpixel being added to it, which is why the color desaturates when it's very, very bright.
And those filters are the reason when I move my head far left and right, I do see a subtle color shift in a bright white screen. If I just look at a bright white screen, I can see like it looks a little more red on that side of the screen and a little more blue on that.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. I thought I had a defective screen at first till I learned that, that it isn't just purely perfectly emissive. It is going through something.
But by having all of the subpixels just being one kind of OLED, that's how LG Display was able to get up to mass production with a high enough yield to make it financially viable. So now, with Samsung coming back to this, what they're doing with this QD-OLED, because I've heard all of this stuff misdescribed all over the place, because some people are saying, it's quantum dots added to OLED, so it's going to be the best of both worlds. It's going to be the fantastic black levels and self-emissiveness of OLED, but it's going to have the super bright and super wide color of quantum dots, that because they're using quantum dots with their current LCD TVs. I'm like, that's not quite true, because what they're doing now is all blue. Okay, every single subpixel in the QD-OLED is blue. So they only have to make one type of OLED subpixel. They don't have to make red, green, and blue, only blue. And then,
but then how do you make a blue one look green or red?
By having a layer of quantum dots on top of it. Because the way quantum dots work is they can take a shorter wavelength of light and turn it into a longer wavelength of light. So blue...
Well, that's what plasmas always did, right? UV light hit a phosphor and turned into visible light.
Was hitting a phosphor, And the goal ultimately of quantum dots is to be able to activate them just with an electron beam. Something that's an even shorter wavelength than visible blue light. But for the moment, we don't have quantum dots that work that way yet, outside of some, very test cases. So what they're doing is using a all blue OLED subpixel structure, 3 blue OLED subpixels per pixel, and then one of them is fed through a green quantum dot filter, and a second one is fed through a red quantum dot filter. So the blue light is being turned into green light or turned into red light. Now, you can't make the quantum dot emit brighter light than the original light source. It will, in fact, there is some loss, always be a bit dimmer than the original light source. So how bright the original blue LED subpixels are of the Samsung is going to be the maximum brightness of a QD-OLED. You can't say that it's just because we have QLED, where it's an LED backlight turning the blue LEDs into red and green light via quantum dots. Those are hitting now, close to 2000 nits. Well, that's traditional LEDs, which are brighter than OLED subpixels. So don't expect QD-OLEDs to magically be hitting 1500 nits or something like that. It all depends on how bright Samsung can make now blue OLEDs, but they shouldn't have to have a white subpixel. And the blue light is just coming directly through. It's blue OLED subpixels, and then they're using quantum dots to create the green and the red.
I will be very interested to see that color gamut. Can it hit those super wide points perfectly?
Because the quantum dots aren't perfect. Some of the blue light always leaks through. So that could actually mean some wider spectrum in the red and the green color instead of a really narrow pinpoint. It could actually widen it because some of that blue light is going to leak through. So the point being, though, this is to simplify the process like what LG Display did. They only have to produce one type of OLED subpixel. They don't have to produce 3 different types and do, pick and place like they were doing with the RGB. So, this should allow them to be somewhat close to being price competitive with what LG Display is doing, but they're also years behind in the manufacturing process compared to where LG Display is. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It's the same sort of thing, just a different lighting mechanism.
Instead of white OLEDs being fed through traditional filters, it's all blue OLEDs, and one of them being fed through green quantum dots and the other one being fed through red quantum dots, and then the blue just stays blue.
Do you remember back in the day somebody tried to make a direct electron beam onto phosphor?
Yes.
It was called like an SED or something?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, SED,
Yeah. Whatever happened to that? That
never came to
cool.
market.
Nobody could get it to work, I guess, huh? All right, now we've got a few comments. David F. absolutely refuses to get an Apple TV 4K, which I just mentioned that my friend's bringing over, even after Rob really tried to convince him it would be the best streaming box to get to go along with his new Epson projector. He decided to get a new graphics card for his home theater PC instead. One of the models listed as supporting the DRM for 4K HDR Netflix. But it didn't work, as his existing motherboard still wouldn't work with the DRM signal. Oh, it's so frustrating. He searched some dark corners of the internet and found a BIOS image that promised to get things working, but he ended up breaking his motherboard. Yeah, don't go flashing your BIOS with random BIOS images off the internet. So a new motherboard was installed, and that got everything working, including being able to play back retail Ultra HD Blu-ray discs now. Except Amazon Prime Video won't play in 4K HDR with Atmos on Windows. And Disney Plus hasn't announced a Windows app or a TiVo app, and the only streaming device he has is an Amazon Fire TV stick, but no Disney Plus on that either. Would he still be helped with that Apple TV 4K?
Yeah, because Disney Plus announced that Apple TV 4K is one of the devices, the first device, in fact, they announced was the Apple TV 4K. And Amazon Prime Video comes out in 4K HDR with Atmos, including Dolby Vision. It's bizarrely, one of the very few devices that supports Dolby Vision from Amazon Prime is the Apple TV 4K. So it would still be the box to do everything. However, he has a functioning home theater PC now that does everything that he wants it to do outside of Amazon Prime Video, which he can get through his Fire TV stick, but then he's not sure what he's going to do with Disney Plus. I would be shocked if there isn't a Windows app for Disney Plus in the very near future. I wouldn't be shocked.
No? I would not. No, I wouldn't be shocked.
You'd think, I'm just saying. Just like through a browser, shouldn't you be able to watch it?
Yeah, you would think. You'd think a lot of things. You would think I'd be able to watch Amazon Prime 4K HDR Interstellar, but I can't.
True.
Why can't I? So that kind of randomness. So basically what we're saying is he should have followed the show's advice.
Well, there it is. These are the things you do Ignore my advice at your peril. There.
I mean, you don't have to do what we say, but it might help. Adam P. wanted to share some photos and a few more details about his theater, where Tom and Rob said the solution to pretty much all of his questions would be to get a smaller projection screen. Adam actually agrees, but he has a sentimental attachment to the 160-inch screen he's using, as it was a project he made with family members, one of whom has passed away now. I get that.
Absolutely.
The addition of a new shed has allowed him to clear out a bunch of stuff from this theater, which is a converted garage. So moving his surround speakers back is an option now, although he can't help thinking it would be more fun to buy even more speakers. Well, yeah, I mean, it's always more fun to buy more new stuff and more speakers. And he did send some lovely pictures. That is looking really cool.
Yeah, so these are actual like theater seats where the seat bottom folds up. I'm betting he probably reclaimed those from a theater, because that's what a lot of people do. It's a very cost-effective way to get a bunch of actual genuine theater seats. So all the items that we're seeing in the images, not necessarily all of them are there anymore, but his surround speakers, he had the surround left sort of up on a stand and on top of something to get it sort of up at the right height, and over on the right-hand side he had it mounted onto a support beam, but in line with his front row of seats. And he says, yeah, sitting in his front row of seats with his enormous 160-inch screen is actually, there is such a thing as a little bit too large of an image when you start having to turn your neck around to see everything. But he's got his HSU subwoofer up in the front right corner, I think, or front left corner. I think in the far back right corner, he's got a second one of those subs. So, yeah. Very
And how did he manage to spell out video signals with those cool looking letters? I don't know. I just dig the whole vibe down there. I love the fabric on that chair up front, that kind of love seat. I don't know. I just dig it.
Yep.
I'm down with it, man.
It's very nice. And everything is understood there. And now that you can move your surround speakers back to be in line with your second row with your primary seats, I think you'll be doing just fine.
I think so. Here's some questions from last week. Andrew L. asks the following. Atmos versus DTS-X, is one superior to the other in any way? Not in any way that's going to make a difference to your life.
I mean, in terms of raw capability, the notion of you can still have channels for your traditional 7 speakers on the ground, and you can actually still have channels for 2 overhead, and then you can also have object-based audio where it's an individual sound that has some metadata attached to it that allows the processor inside of your AV receiver to decide the best way to play back that sound. It basically just gives coordinate data, and based on the speakers that you have, that can be steered into the available speakers that you have. However, there is a difference at the moment between the home version of Atmos and the home version of DTS-X, which is that the home version of DTS-X can use a maximum of 11 speakers, and that's where it tops out at the moment. Whereas Atmos can go, well, it can if you have a Trinov altitude, probably the 48, because it can go all the way up to 24.1.10. It can do that right now if you have the processor to do it. But of course, I mean, we have more reasonable processors like Denon's AVR X8500H that can do 13 speakers right now with Atmos, or we have the processors from Emotiva, or the forthcoming one from Monoprice, that can do 15 speakers plus a subwoofer channel. So only Atmos can do that at home right now. DTS-X, even if you have a Trinov, is limited to 11 speakers. So
technically Atmos could be said to be superior
at the moment,
but for most of us mere mortals,
sure. Now DTS has said that DTS-X Pro is coming. We don't have a date. We don't know how long that will take, and that will essentially make it the equivalent of Atmos at that point. But that would be different. That wouldn't be DTS-X. That would be DTS-X Pro. So there is a difference. Atmos is capable of using more speakers right now.
All right. Andrew has a demo disc with a scene of a helicopter flying around I have clicked on the wrong thing. Please hold. Okay. With a scene of a helicopter flying around and overhead. He played the disc on his Xbox One and had the Xbox set to output Atmos. When he played the scene that way, it sounded as though the helicopter panned left to right overhead, but not front to back and not in a full circle all the way around. He switched to DTS output, and now it sounded as though the helicopter was flying in a full circle overhead. Why was there such a big difference between the two codecs?
Oh, doggy, there is a surprising amount to unpack here. Far more than you might have anticipated.
There's a lot of variables.
There is a heck of a lot here. So, first of all, I'm not sure what demo disc he's referring to, because I'm not aware of a demo disc that has the same content in both Atmos and DTS-X, where you could switch between soundtracks with, the same video is playing, but one DTS-X soundtrack and an Atmos soundtrack on the same content. So I
would bet there's no such thing.
I mean, there are some Hollywood movies released that have both a DTS-X and an Atmos soundtrack. So first of all, let's assume that it is a case where there's one video, but you can switch between an actual Atmos and an actual DTS-X soundtrack. Those two things would have been mastered separately. It's not as though they mastered it once and then ran it through an Atmos encoder and ran it through a DTS-X encoder. Those would have been mastered separately. So we could be dealing with completely different masters, but more likely, this demo disc is in some original codec. I don't know what. It might not even be Atmos or DTS-X. It might be a Dolby True HD demo disc or a DTS HD Master Audio demo disc. So that's one thing. I'm not sure what the actual original signal is. Now, let's deal with the Xbox One, because if you tell the Xbox One to output Atmos audio, everything comes out as an Atmos signal. Or at least it did. Now it seems to be able to auto-switch back to 7.1 PCM. But essentially, the signal that comes out of the Xbox One, it'll turn your AV receiver into Atmos mode, but that doesn't mean the original signal was Atmos. It can be basically using the Dolby surround up mixer inside of the Xbox One first, and then sending that out with a flag telling your AV receiver to go into Atmos mode. Now, an interesting thing to know about the Dolby surround up mixer is that while it does put sounds into your overhead speakers, it pretty much only does left and right. It doesn't really do a whole lot of front to back stuff using the Dolby surround up mixer. So when he says that's the way this helicopter
sounds like what
sounded,
he's describing,
that's what this, it sounds like what was actually being applied. Now, I know the front of your AV receiver probably did say Atmos on it, because that's what would have happened coming out of an Xbox One. But I'm fairly certain from his description that the original codec on this demo disc was probably not Atmos. And when you put the Xbox One into Atmos mode, it was applying its own Dolby surround up mixer inside of the Xbox One. The signal went out with a flag. It put your receiver into Atmos mode, but it's basically the Dolby surround up mixer, which has left to right panning overhead, but not front to back. So then he says he switches over to DTS and got front to back and full circling and everything, which makes me think this was a DTS-X demo disc. That's what it makes me suspect.
That sounds 100% right. It's another great argument for you should always watch or listen to things in the manner in which they were intended to be watched or listened to.
Now, the thing is, it might still not have been a DTS-X demo disc. It might be that it just activated the DTS Neural X up mixer, which does tend to do some front-to-back panning in the overhead channels. It tends to goose the overhead speakers more than they should be, so they're more noticeable, but it does tend to do left to right and front to back. So multiple things could be going on here, Andrew, far more than you might have expected, but it's important to note, because he asked, why is there such a big difference between the two codecs? You probably weren't listening to actual Atmos and DTS-X. And you certainly couldn't then make the generalization that, because of this demo, DTS-X is superior or something in that way. You cannot
That's the key
generalize
takeaway.
that.
You're not comparing the two directly.
No, and it certainly sounds like what you were hearing was a Dolby surround up mixer version of whatever this helicopter flying demo was.
All right. Andrew noticed that Dolby is now saying that surround speakers should be placed no more than 2 feet above seated ear height. But if you look at where the surround speakers are on the sidewalls in a commercial movie theater, they're way higher. So why the discrepancy?
So first of all, interesting that they're now saying, oh, no more than 2 feet above seated ear height because so before Atmos existed, they always said your surround and surround back speakers should be elevated. Essentially to give you a clear line of sight from any speaker to any seat, which is what Tom and I still recommend. You should have a clear line of sight from any surround speaker to any given seat. Now, when Atmos came out, they suddenly said your surround and surround back speakers should be at ear level, not elevated at all, and they erased all trace of ever having recommended that they be elevated, as though they had never said that, and they would deny that it was ever the case.
Like some sort of George Orwell audio situation. Mini True has decided now.
If we remove it, it never existed.
Never happened.
But yeah, apparently now they're now saying, okay, 2 feet elevated is okay. So the commercial movie theaters, most of them were built prior to Atmos existing. Most Atmos theaters have been retrofit, and they simply never moved the surround speakers. They are still trying to have a clear line of sight to all seats, and they're dealing with way more seats in a full-size commercial movie theater than they are in your home. But more or less, most of it is just that the theater already existed. They're not going to bother moving because they have lots of surround speakers lining the sidewalls.
Even in a new theater, it would be weird if you were near the front and the surround speakers to your sides were lower than the top of the screen, lower even than than the middle of the screen, and still be above your head, because in a big stadium seating kind of situation, that could happen.
Yeah.
So they kind of have to put them up higher so that the people in the back can still have them even with their heads.
And also, I mean, if you were sitting on the far right, you most certainly wouldn't want a full-sized theater speaker actually right beside you. That would be quite literally deafening. It's primarily because they're dealing with so many more seats. They have to have those speakers elevated so that they're getting the full coverage over the entire audience, so that they're not deafening someone who's sitting over on the side of the theater. And they're dealing with the fact that the theater probably existed before Atmos did, and they're just not going to bother to move those speakers at this point.
So I think as a rule at home, it's like you guys have been saying, just get it high enough where everybody can see each surround speaker.
Similar thing. If you have your speakers directly to your sides and you've got a 3-seater couch, the person sitting in the right-hand seat doesn't want the surround right speaker literally right on their ear. That is still a very unpleasant thing, whereas if you elevate it a couple of
Another friend of mine did that kind of once many years ago. It was right here.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend it, and I'm happy to see that they're now elevating them somewhat makes sense. I can see them saying don't elevate it too much because you don't want them getting so high up that they're essentially redundant now with the Atmos speakers. So they still want separation between the Atmos speakers above and the surround speakers to your sides and the surround back speakers behind you. I understand that. In general, you want at least about 5 feet of separation between any speaker so that it is sounding discreet and not redundant with anything else.
All right, are we ready to start new questions?
I believe so.
Okay, finally new questions. New for this week, Damien D, and I'm excited about this one because it starts with a puppy.
It does.
Damien D. To start, Damien wanted to say congratulations to Tom and his family for their new puppy, Violet. Damien and his family just adopted an American Bulldog puppy, and they've named him Mojo Jojo.
Which I very much like. I am a big fan of the Powerpuff Girls, and
Mojo Jojo is adorable.
Everybody. If we're watching the YouTube video,
if you're only listening and you're not getting any video or images here, just know that it's one of them puppy dogs where one half of the face is albino white with pink ear, and the other exact half of the face is brown, and it looks so neato, and that dog looks so sweet, all curled up there.
Very cute little puppy. So yes, congratulations, puppies. Damien and your family. That is a lovely little dog.
I don't need to talk about anything else. Puppies. I'm fine with just puppies. But we will. Damien has a 2.1 setup in his huge open living room. And a 5.2 setup in his basement. He's keeping a spreadsheet of all the various upgrade options he's considering for both, and I've done that for computers and other stuff. Many nerd points for opening up a spreadsheet and keeping it in there. And he'd like some additional advice, starting with the living room. At present, he's using an Onkyo TX NR646 receiver with a pair of stick-style floor-standing speakers and his little Pioneer SW8 Mark II 8-inch subwoofer. His TV is a 65-inch Vizio P series, and his Onkyo receiver is one model year too early. It can't pass through Dolby Vision signals. That feature arrived with the 656 the following model year.
Yep, so he's got the 646, and 1 year later, it can pass Dolby Vision, so he's got this lovely Vizio TV that can do Dolby Vision, and unfortunately, his AV receiver cannot pass that signal through.
That's true. So what would we recommend as a receiver upgrade? The 656. Now,
nope.
With the possibility that this system might expand to 5.1 at some point, but likely never beyond that. And just so we're aware, he's using a Denon X4400H in his basement. You have a lot of options.
You do. However, I'm going to take the tack of the possibility that he said, he might want to expand this to 5.1, and to do so so he's got this very high ceiling, very open concept at the back of the room. That's where it opens up into the kitchen and dining area, and
a loft up above.
The loft up above. So he's got this section up above behind his seats where you could conceive of maybe mounting some surround speakers, because directly to his left is the fireplace and over on the right is the staircase, and we've seen this sort of design in very open high ceiling living rooms before.
It's very pretty.
Oh, yeah. But to put...
It's not practical for theater, but it's very pretty.
To put surround speakers on that sort of loft area, just below the railing for that loft back there, it might be very convenient to use wireless speakers, instead of trying to find a way of routing cable all the way there from wherever the AV receiver is living. And for that, I was thinking it could be worth considering Yamaha's current lineup of AV receivers. Now, you'd want to look for, if you're looking in the RXV series, a model number that ends with a 5, or if you're looking in the Avantage RXA series, one that ends with an 80. Those are the 2019 models, and those have added a wonderful new feature that Yamaha is not marketing nearly enough, which is that you can have wireless surround speakers, not surround back, not Atmos, just the surround, the left and right surround. Those are the only ones that can be wireless, but using their own Yamaha MusicCast speakers, either the MusicCast 20 speaker or the MusicCast 50 speaker. And the MusicCast 50 speaker is very interesting because that is already a stereo speaker, so you could use one as a single surround speaker somewhere behind you firing its two tweeters out its sides like it does. You can set up two 50s as a stereo pair and as stereo surrounds, or you can use a single 50 as stereo surrounds, just one of them behind you, or a pair of MusicCast 20s.
I feel like in that big old space,
the
last thing he wants is more bouncing of sound.
In this space, I would probably use two 50s because you just need the raw output. But the point being, these do need power. You'd still have to find a way to plug them into power, but I'm assuming there's plugs somewhere up above those railings.
In that loft area, that'd be perfect.
I'm sure there are. And that would mean you could mount a pair of MusicCast 50s, have them behind you there as your wireless surround speakers, and it works automatically with a Yamaha 2019 model receiver. Now, of course, you've got a Denon downstairs. If you go with this Yamaha suggestion upstairs, you wouldn't be able to send signals wirelessly between the two. Denon is using Hios. Yamaha is using MusicCast, and those two things don't talk to each other. But he hasn't talked much about using Hios as a whole house audio setup or anything like that. So I'm just saying that's a cool feature that Yamaha is offering in their AV receivers, where out of the box with their current model year, you can have wireless surrounds, and that might be handy for you. Now, if you go over to Denon and Marantz, you might consider the SR5014. That is the lowest price model out of the Denon and Marantz lineup that lets you play what is happening in your main zone in full surround sound and down mix that very same source into zone 2. It's like the first time Denon and Marantz have ever done this. Yamaha's been doing it for years. But
I'm kind of a Yamaha fanboy. I'll admit it. I've been for a very long time. So yeah.
But that would be. I don't even know if that's something he wants to do. But it's just that's the new feature that's being offered in the 2019. Little bit higher model number Marantz and Denon models, because only the what is it? The 3600H in Denon and up does it. The 1600 and the 2600 don't do it in Denon's lineup. So, but yeah, I'm kind of favoring that Yamaha. And just to let you know, if you go with the RX V685 or 785, the 685 you can grab for under $400 right now, and that gets you the pretty good version of YPOW, their room correction. That's the one that comes with the reflected sound control, which is basically a fur filter instead of just an IIR filter. It's also the RX A780 and up that get that. To get the one that uses multiple microphone measurements, you have to start with the RX A880, which is putting up to about the $550 mark. At Accessories for Less, by the way. Those aren't retail prices. I always quote Accessories for Less. That's just where you go.
Right, because that's where you should start.
Yep, but something like that RX A780, which you can get for $400 at Accessories for Less, I think that could be a very nice choice here.
Very nice. Moving on with more questions from Damien. After some research and demos, he's looking for tower speakers that can play loud to contend with his huge open space. But it would also be nice if the receiver could power them to those loud output levels. So the RBH R55 and KEF Q900 are on his spreadsheet. Again, with the spreadsheet, but they'd likely need a high wattage external amplifier. They have the ability to play very loud with their high power handling, but they need the watts. Klipsch remains on his list, obviously, for their very high sensitivity, but his front runners are the Paradigm Monitor version 7 series with their combination of above average sensitivity plus more neutral sound than Klipsch. He hasn't had any luck finding used pairs on eBay, so any other websites he should search to look for those Paradigms.
So for certain, Paradigm being a Canadian speaker company, and lots of Canadians having bought Paradigm speakers and upgrading them over time and perhaps having them for sale, we have Canuck Audio Mart here in Canada as a website for selling used audio equipment, and there is an equivalent US Audio Mart when they are owned by the same parent company. So you will sometimes see listings from Canuck Audio Mart on US Audio Mart for people who are willing to ship across the border.
I was about to say, so you're able, when you list something, to say, I don't mind shipping it across.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, some people say I only want to ship within Canada or I only want local pickup, in which case those wouldn't show up on US Audio Mart. But the people who are like, yep, I'm fine shipping this to the United States, then that will show up on US Audio Mart. So that might be a good place to look because lots of people selling Paradigm in Canada. AudioGone, of course, is the other place that you would definitely want to check. That is a huge website for selling used audio and video gear. So AudioGone is a place to check. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention is a completely different alternative. I haven't seen you mention this as a choice, probably because it's not an actual tower, but HSU speakers. They have their horn-loaded speakers. What I would suggest in your case would be going for their HC1 Mark II, which is normally seen as a horizontal center speaker, but nothing prevents you from turning it vertically and using it that way. And on some nice speaker stands, it can have either a tower look or just be a nice, large bookshelf speaker on a stand. And it would have the efficiencies similar to Klipsch, but with a bit more neutral sound, in my opinion, than what Klipsch offers.
So it doesn't have a dispersion that is better used horizontally?
No, well, you can actually rotate the tweeter, which they say to do. Yeah, you unscrew it, rotate it 90 degrees, and there it is. It can be used vertically. It says so right in the manual. Feel free to use it vertically.
There you go. We said how he should attempt to put absorption literally anywhere that he can in this huge open space. One area he's sure he wants to treat are the windows on the left. Damien's mom is a talented seamstress, and she's happy to make thick drapes for him if he asks. That sounds good. But would some freestanding acoustic panels help way more than even very thick drapes? Well, technically, it could, depending on what you're willing to tolerate as far as size and thickness and appearance. There's all kinds of things you can do.
I mean, if you can make your drapes literally so pleated that they are essentially a 4 to 6 inch thick panel. I mean, that's bunching the material together a lot. Maybe
basically make them into like bedspreads. You know what I mean? Like a quilt, basically.
Because I mean, that can work. It's just most people aren't willing to pleat and bunch together their drapes that much. I mean, imagine a drape that would go across your entire wall, and then you've pulled the drawstring and completely closed it. All right. Now that but all the way across, right? The closed curtain bunched up that much together and all the way across. I mean, if you just think conceptually, I mean, that's what a piece of insulation more or less is. It's just a bunch of material.
Bunch of fabric stuffed into a small space.
Pushed together with some air gaps in between so that the sound waves are forced to keep transitioning between air, material, air, material, air, material. That's why they're good at causing that sound wave to lose energy as it passes through that material. So, of course, the alternative is to have a much more traditional curtain or drape and then just have a panel behind it. You don't see it. What you see is the curtain. And
what you don't see is the sun ever again if you do that, because you do just block the window entirely.
He already has blinds over these windows. At least in the images, there are blinds already over the windows. So as far as people looking from the outside into the house, they would see the blind. Then you have a panel standing in front of the window and a curtain in front of the panel, right? So, I mean, it's just a matter of where do you want to spend your money, because honestly, I don't think the price difference is going to be significant. It's either a ton of material and very heavy bunched together drapes, which is probably just as expensive or possibly more expensive than getting a panel and then just having a regular drape or curtain in front of it.
I would still highly, highly recommend that wall behind the television to get some sort of treatments back there, like get something attractive where you can get, you can get those posters or whatever printed on
panels
fabric
or just, I mean, if you go to Acoustimac, they have panels that aren't printed, but they have cool designs on them.
There you go. And get some matching, some eclectic, cool-looking stuff, and put as much as you can stand on that wall behind the TV, because that is a big old drywall wall.
It sure is.
That's reflecting a lot. At least your sort of stone fireplace is doing a little bit of diffusion. A little bit, maybe?
At
a little
very
bit.
high frequencies.
Got some unevenness up there, maybe. I'm just trying to be positive. But yeah, put acoustic treatments wherever you can stand it is still the advice. Now on to his basement. We are in Damien's basement now. First, just an update. We mentioned how he might be able to use the bed risers under the legs of one of his couches to sort of give him a raised second row. He says it isn't a perfect solution, but it's helpful until a proper riser can be built. Just don't get to rocking left and right too much on that second row.
So.
That's up higher.
It's working for now. It's giving a sight line. His kids have clearly found a way to hop up there. So that's great.
I'm sure they love it. That looks fun. When he first described the dimensions of this basement room, we said his pair of SB12 NSD subwoofers should be just fine. But it turns out the room is actually more of a large T shape and not an enclosed rectangle. So he's actually dealing with about 4,000 cubic feet of air. Is a subwoofer upgrade in order? You know what? When people ask that, they're like, "Can I buy a subwoofer? Tell me I should buy a subwoofer?"
Okay, so by the numbers, boy, I'm gonna get in trouble. By the numbers, objectively, yeah, I guess. But here's my real recommendation.
He stopped listening right then.
I know.
You said, "Yeah, I guess," and he stopped listening, and he's opening a browser right now.
Here's my real recommendation, because I bet that your SB12 NSDs right now do not have their own volume dials literally turned up as high as they can possibly go.
That's probably true.
And with SVS subs, you can actually do that. It is okay to have the volume dials on SVS subs actually turned up as high as they will go. They will still not distort or break themselves. So as long as you still have room on the volume dials themselves, I will tell you, just keep turning them up until you reach the levels that you like. If you can't get there, you've turned the SB12 NSD's own volume dials all the way up as high as they go, and you've run Odyssey or whatever, and after having done that, you've manually increased the trim levels of the subwoofer output, and you've turned the master volume all the way up to 0 dB now, and your bass is still not loud enough, okay, you have to upgrade your subs because you have maxed
It's too late. He stopped listening like 3 minutes ago, and he's ordering bigger subs because you said the word yes.
But because I mean, objectively, that by the numbers, that should be the case in 4,000 cubic feet. But I seriously doubt in reality that you have reached that actual limit.
You're probably right, but I'm just picturing him clickety, madly ordering. Oh, I got it. He said yes.
He's using his... Want to be truthful.
I know, you're right. He's using his Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers for now, but he's definitely planning an upgrade, of course. Tom and Rob have most often recommended RBH and Ascend. So his front runners are the RBH Impression 515 or Impression Elite 515E, or the Ascend CMT 340 SE. The RBH look nicer, but the Ascend claims higher sensitivity and slightly higher power handling. He's feeling torn. Can we push him one way or the other? Well, I mean, the look is a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to live in a space in the real world, and you have to enjoy it in every way.
For sure. Here's the way I would put it to you, Damien. I will say strike the regular Impression series off your list. All right, take it away. So now you're only dealing with the CMT 340 SE or the Impression Elite. All right. Now look at the prices, because the Impression Elite is more expensive. And if you're like, that is pushing my budget, but I can afford the CMT 340 SE, then the CMT 340 SE have won. Because to me, the CMT 340 SE are a small but noticeable upgrade over the regular Impression series. And in my opinion, the Impression Elite are a very small, perhaps, slight upgrade over the CMT 340 SE. They are. The drivers are higher quality in there, and you like the looks better, but they're more expensive. So I would put the Impression Elite at the top of those three. I would just get rid of the traditional Impression series. Don't consider them anymore. Now it's just price for price. That's how I would decide.
He is staring at that spreadsheet right now. He's like, okay, so it is better. It's better. He just heard better. And it's
because you're not sitting far enough away that the higher sensitivity is a concern. And you've got enough power, so that's not a concern. So you like the looks better, and I do think the Impression Elite is a little bit better than CMT 340 SE, but if they're too expensive, then just go, nope, that's it, CMT 340, and there you go.
Right. He continues on, both the RBH 515 and the Ascend CMT 340 SE use an MTM design, and he digs that. Why don't there seem to be more MTM bookshelf speakers that can be used as left, right, and center?
I mean, there are quite a few out there.
There are.
There are many, many out there. The thing is, when you take so if this is vertical, right? So MTM means mid-range tweeter, mid-range. You've got a tweeter that is in between two woofers. And when that is done vertically, that is called a Dapolito array, after Joe Dapolito, who invented that. I mean, the whole thing, along with the crossover that goes inside of it, that is the Dapolito array. And a good thing that it has is very wide horizontal dispersion, but slightly limited vertical dispersion, so you don't get effects off of the ceiling and the floor as much, but you get very wide horizontal dispersion, and that works very nicely for a lot of configurations while also giving you higher power handling and higher output capabilities than just a single woofer in a traditional bookshelf speaker. But when you take an actual Dapolito array speaker and just turn it horizontally, which has been done a lot, it doesn't work properly in a horizontal configuration, because now you have tall vertical dispersion but narrower horizontal dispersion.
So it's not like that rotating tweeter we talked about earlier.
No. So that's been done a ton, and it shouldn't really be. So that would be one reason why you're not necessarily seeing vertically designed Dapolito array speakers marketed as this can also be a center. In the case of something like the CMT 340 SE, where it looks the same vertically or horizontally, Dave details how in the horizontal version, he has made significant changes to the crossover, so that the dispersion of that tweeter merging up against the woofers is different, so that it has the wider horizontal dispersion that a traditional Dapolito array wouldn't. And Damien actually asked about this, but in the case of the RBH, they offset the tweeter. It's not directly in the middle. They have moved it slightly so that when you turn it horizontally, you don't have all of the comb filtering problems that you have when they're just all aligned in an array. So there's more to it than just taking an MTM design and turning it sideways. You have to either adjust the crossover significantly or do something with that tweeter to change the dispersion pattern so that it gives you a wide horizontal center.
Right, you sort of touched on his next question, which is when the RBH 515E are placed vertically as front, left, right, how should the offset tweeters be positioned?
Yes.
That was his
because they do market it as a left, center, right. The traditional advice here is have the tweeter closer to the listener. So if it's your front left speaker, then the tweeter will be to the inside. It'll be closer to your TV. It'll be closer to you,
okay.
and the woofers will be closer to the left side wall. And then on the right side, the tweeter will be closer to you, closer to the TV. The woofers will be closer to the right side wall. And if the center speaker is below the TV, the tweeter would be up. And if the speaker is above the TV, the tweeter would be down. So,
side note, if I put my bookshelf speakers as surround speakers just above me to my left and right, and I want to lay them horizontally, but they're a traditional arrangement, would I put the tweeter farther back toward the back wall?
You'd probably put the tweeter towards the front wall because you're more concerned with having a blend from your front speakers into your surrounds. The basic idea is wherever the woofers are, it limits the dispersion of the tweeter in that direction a little bit. Okay. So you're probably, there's no right or wrong in the scenario that you described.
Try it, basically.
Yeah, there's not, but you're usually more concerned with having a nice blend from your front speakers into your side surrounds, so you probably wouldn't want to limit the dispersion in the forward direction. But, I mean, if you're more concerned with having the surround fill in the back of the room, then you'd turn it the other way.
Right, maybe so. And so this kind of blends in to his next question, pun intended. What if you use an RBH 515 as a vertical center? Does it matter which side the offset tweeter goes to? And what about horizontal center speakers that use a tweeter above a small mid-range driver? Is it even possible to use a speaker like that vertically?
Yeah, so on the first part, if you took a 515 and turned it vertical, but then used it as a vertical center, I mean, it doesn't really matter which side it goes on. It has 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. That isn't going to make a significant difference. When it comes to a center speaker that's been designed with a tweeter above a small mid-range driver and then woofers on either side of that vertical stack, which means that it has been designed mostly to be used horizontally so that you get rid of the lobing and comb filtering problems that usually happen when there's just woofer, tweeter, woofer. Now you have woofer, tweeter above little mid-range driver and woofer on the other side. So those woofers are only playing very low frequencies. So yes, you absolutely can turn that vertically and use it. It will have limited dispersion toward the little mid-range driver side. So again, you would probably have the tweeters closest to you, but like Ascend's Horizon, you can absolutely turn that vertical and just have the tweeters on the insides.
So continuing on in Damien's basement, eventually we may have to call for help. We've been down here a while. His basement has a drop tile ceiling. He knows he enjoys how Atmos sounds at his local theater, so he's quite certain he will install Atmos in his basement at some point. At the moment, there's no insulation above the ceiling tiles, just empty space. The bare floor joists and the bare subfloor above. Would switch stick ceiling tiles be enough on their own, or would it be better to just put in lots of insulation above his existing ceiling tiles, or should he do both, insulation and switch to acoustic ceiling tiles? Now, I'm going to just take a wild guess. It's always going to be better to fill in that with mass if you want to transfer less, to the floor above.
Right. You definitely want the cavity above filled with insulation, for sure. Now, whether you switch out your existing ceiling tiles for acoustic ceiling tiles or not, that's a matter of, do you want your ceiling to play double duty as basically acoustic panels? Because that's what acoustic ceiling tiles are. They're basically acoustic panels now hanging in your drop tile ceiling. So if you aren't able to because I remember he was saying before, he and his family have strong allergies, so they were in favor of getting rid of the carpet down there if possible. And so I was like, well, if you're going to do that, switch to acoustic ceiling tiles, because then, you don't have the carpet anymore acting as absorption, but you'd have your whole ceiling acting as absorption, and that would be okay. So that's how to decide whether or not to switch the tiles. But regardless, either way, for sure, put insulation in the cavity above.
Definitely. And he has one more question. We're still in his basement. We're about to escape. What should he install as in-ceiling Atmos speakers? He has to consider that he'll be installing them within a drop tile ceiling grid and potentially looking to use back cans or backer boxes. So what would we recommend? And I see you have prepared a series of RBH links.
Yeah, I mean, we know that RBH is one of his top contenders. I suspect he'll end up with some Impression Elite speakers up front. Why not have beautifully matching in-ceiling Atmos speakers from RBH? You'd be looking at the Visage series. You could go with either the VA or the VM VM. The VM use the very same drivers as the Elite Impression series, the M series drivers, although honestly that's a bit more expensive and overkill for your Atmos channels. But RBH has everything you need. They have a wonderful little bracket that supports all the weight of the speaker within a drop tile ceiling grid. It is exactly for that purpose. So you get yourself that bracket for each of them that connects to your existing ceiling grid, and that supports all the weight of the insulating speaker. Then they have a selection of back cans. These are full back cans. I highly recommend them. If you have insulation in that cavity above, this will make sure that insulation never gets into the back of the speaker. For code purposes, that can be necessary depending on where you live. In an attic, it is always necessary, but this is between a basement and first floor. But regardless, it's the safe choice. You shouldn't have any problem as far as depth, so go for, if you can, the larger backer can. But they also have a shallow back can in case this needs to go into a fairly shallow ceiling space, or I don't know, maybe you have a pipe or a duct or something running above one of those locations, and the shallow back can get the job done for you. So I'm saying go with RBH because they have all the solutions you could possibly need.
All right, so we're crawling out of the basement, running down the street, screaming now to another questioner. I'm just kidding, Damien. Marty S. has questions. Marty wants to improve the 2-channel capabilities of his 5.1 system. He's currently using DefTech Mythos 6 speakers mounted on his front wall, and he has never really loved them when listening to music. So he's thinking of switching to tower or bookshelf speakers. He's considering Ohm Walsh towers based on their reputation for holding their own at high-end audio shows. Their unique design has endured, so they must be capable of sounding good, right? Do we have any opinions about them? Well, number one, just because something's been around for a long time doesn't mean it's fantastic.
Also,
almost anything that appears at a high-end
audio show is something I might ignore just for having been at a high-end audio show. So, I mean, these Ohm speakers, they have been around for a while. A very different design.
They're unusual. They are very unusual.
You usually can't see inside them, but some reviews have sort of printed a little cutaway. They have a cone, like you might find as a traditional woofer, but it's elongated. You know, it is deeper and longer front to back than a normal speaker driver cone.
It looks like a funnel, like a funnel you would pour something through, yes.
And it fires down into the cabinet. The cabinet acts as a transmission line, so that's where you get most of your bass. But the mid-range, and in fact, in the original design, it was a single driver design in the original design. Everything was actually being radiated off the back of this elongated cone. So sound is being thrown in 360 degrees.
Doesn't that make things out of phase or something?
It does all kinds of weird stuff. And the more recent designs they call it a super tweeter, which whatever, who cares? They call it a super tweeter. It basically only acts from 8 kilohertz and above, so primarily the sound that you're listening to is still coming off the back of that elongated cone. But they have these now super tweeters going from 8 kilohertz up that they mount at a very strange angle. It's sort of up and diagonal, so the two of them cross well in front of the listening position and actually kind of going all the way back here, reflect off the ceiling, they claim, and do all kinds of interesting stuff with these very high frequencies. Okay, so this
is one of those audiophile things that it has a very distinct character, and it's weird, and it sounds so different and not bad that everybody walks in and goes, "Whoa, what is that?
That's
sound
new.
is coming
That's
from
interesting.
Everywhere." Yeah.
There is no recording. Well, I don't know. Maybe somebody made a recording where these were what they were using to monitor and make the recording.
No,
but
nobody ever did that.
The vast majority, the majority beyond 99.99999 forever repeating percent was not mastered on a speaker like this. No. I can't in good faith say that this is what you should get. I want to address the whole idea of these DefTech Mythos 6 speakers because I don't know what he has as far as subwoofers go. It sounds, just putting the pieces together, that he might be thinking about just switching to tower speakers all on their own, that when he's listening to 2-channel, he won't have a subwoofer activated. He says he has a 5.1 system, so I'm assuming there's a subwoofer in there, but I don't know what he's been doing when he's been listening to 2-channel music. Has been trying to make the Mythos 6 play full range? They can't. They weren't designed for that. They are small on-wall speakers. They're pretty darn good. I hated the Mythos Center because all they did was take one of the vertical ones and turn it sideways, and it had all kind of comb filtering and lobing problems.
There you go. Just like what we were talking about before.
So I was no fan of using it as a complete left, center, right system with a horizontal version of it. But overall, they're pretty decent speakers. They have very, very little bass to speak of. So if you don't have an excellent combination of your subwoofer and your front, left, right speakers, that could be a lot of why you don't love your DefTech Mythos 6 as music-only speakers. That said, though, they're not like my favorite speakers ever. I would consider that you could get an upgrade to those speakers, so I'm not saying that's not the case. I mean, if you end up with the Ohm Walsh's, I don't. If that's what floats your boat, I'm not going to tell you no, but it wouldn't be something I would ever recommend to someone because they have such a distinct character to them. These are not linear, accurate, faithful to the original recording speakers. They alter what is coming out. If you like it, okay, but it's not something that I can recommend to the masses.
I don't know. I'm starting to think not even okay. No. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, unless it's wrong. Moving on, Marty was thinking that he might build some absorption panels to go on the front wall behind his front left-right speakers, as he gathers that the room might have something to do with why he dislikes his current speakers. Yeah, that's true for a lot of people.
50% of what you're hearing is due to your room and not your gear. Yeah.
But Ohm recommends against putting absorption behind their speakers. Yeah, they're spraying sound out everywhere like a sprinkler. Yes. And they suggest either reflective surfaces or dispersion diffusion at most. Does that sound reasonable? No. It sounds like, please don't block the sound coming out of our weird speaker.
Right. I mean, interestingly, Definitive Technology is well known for their bipole tower speakers, where they have drivers on the backs of their towers that send out nearly as much sound as what's coming out the front of the speaker. And they too will say, well, don't put absorption on the front wall directly behind our speakers because we put drivers firing backwards back there. And it can be a similar thing where sometimes when you're hearing DefTech bipole towers for the first time, you go, oh, that's new and interesting. They do sound fuller and that. But over time...
It's not accurate, though.
Over time, you come to realize that, it isn't faithful to the original signal. No. It is altering it. If you like it, okay. But these are the types of speakers that can be attention-grabbing, because they are different. And
it's like the old Bose that reflected backwards too, that everybody loved.
For a lot of us who've been into audio for a long time, different is exciting because it's different. It's something new. But as you live with it for years and years and years, you start to just appreciate a speaker that tells it like it is.
That's right.
Opinion.
These kinds of speakers are a lot like the ridiculous like Yamaha sound fields in the receiver. I'm pointing this way because I have one of those Yamaha receivers right here. And they just have it like, oh, it sounds like a church. Why?
They will never take that out of their receivers.
No, they won't, and it's moronic, but I love them regardless because I like everything else about them. Ohm has an article posted on their website explaining why the traditional live end, dead end approach to room treatment is a mistake. What's our take? I think you can get what our take is.
Well, I mean, here... it's nobody does the traditional live end, dead end anymore. They're saying there's some studios that still have it. That's probably true. There are still some studios somewhere that still have it. But what they're pointing to with Floyd Toole's research and Todd Welty and Sean Olive's research and everything that came out of Harman, and then research that's done at the National Research Council of Canada and other places around the world, is that you don't want an anechoic chamber. They mentioned that in the article. Yes, agreed. We don't want an anechoic chamber. And you don't want a completely dead end at the front and a completely live end at the back, which was done at one point. And what they mention about speaker designs at the time and not having even horizontal dispersion, that is largely true. So like a lot of dangerous things, they're mixing truth with falsehood and winding up with something where you're like, well, you can't dismiss all of it because a large portion of it is correct. But then the final take, which is that, well, we make weird speakers so they don't work in traditionally treated rooms, and therefore everyone who has a traditionally treated room is wrong. It's like, no, now you've gone a step too far.
Every wacky theory always seems to have little nuggets of truth. Of course.
Well, otherwise you wouldn't listen to anything at all, right?
No, that's not true. Some people will listen.
Well, I guess so. But it would be very easy to dismiss all of it if none of it made any sense. Whereas if you start with a bunch of premises and axioms where you go, okay, true, and then you draw a wrong conclusion,
right,
you're more likely to get people to come along with you. But no, I don't agree with what they say. Traditionally, treat your room. Yes, follow the advice of Toole and Sean Olive and Kevin Vakes, who I particularly agree with from Revel. I am in complete agreement with Kevin Vakes' recommendations, where it depends on the size of your room. You treat a very small room differently from a quite large room, and I am in complete agreement with that.
I think these sorts of speakers also are, it's part of that phenomenon where we can't possibly have solved a problem yet. There must be some fancier answer. You know, you look around and all speakers have drivers aiming at you and nothing out the back, and you go, well, that's how we've been doing it forever. It must be wrong.
No, so you generally want more direct sound than reflected sound. You want some reflected sound because it sounds darn weird when there's none, but the reflected sound that you do get should have same frequency response as the direct sound. So that means you have to have very wide even dispersion, and it all just kind of works.
There you go. Marty knows that mentioning tube amplifiers might trigger us. I'm going to need a safe space if you mention tube amplifiers. But he has heard a few and thought they sounded very nice. So can we explain our opinions about tube amplifiers? Yes, some of them sound very nice.
That's my opinion. Made all the sense in the world when we didn't have easily affordable, accurate transistors. Then we now have very affordable, very accurate, exceedingly low distortion transistors, and they do the job that a tube was there for better. They do it better.
They just do it better.
They do it more.
But the thing is, in this world, if you love it, you don't have to explain to me necessarily why you love it. I don't want you to.
You're paying more.
I don't want you to be wrong about physics, right? Like I want you to be correct about physics,
right?
But if you just like it, knock yourself out, right? If you love the look of it, and usually it's about the look. It has that
they glow.
Lovely warm glow. And let me tell you, the word warm should be banned from audio. Just don't. I don't want to hear the word warm ever again in my life when it talks about audio. For the weather, yes, it's warm, but don't say warm. But that's something about it. It just looks beautiful. I get that. Look, so if you love it, buy it. But
they perform a function. It's just we now have components that perform the function objectively better for a lot less money. So you're paying more for a tube, which will eventually die every time you listen to it. It's slightly different. It doesn't stay consistent all the time, and it's less efficient. It has higher distortion. These are just objective facts. Now, can it sound good? Yeah, you can do all kinds of things in less efficient, more expensive ways.
I mean, a horse can run pretty fast. I mean, you know, if you get on a horse and you know how to ride it, you can get somewhere.
Let's get 500 horses and strap them onto something with wheels. All right.
You can pull stuff with them. Yeah. They're fun. They have fuzzy noses.
It'll be unwieldy. Who knows what'll happen tomorrow? But
they get sick.
There it is.
You know? I mean, you never know. They eventually die and you have to replace them. So it's a lot like horses.
Can it sound good? Yeah, they're doing the function. It's just there's also nothing inherently worse about solid state transistors doing the same job.
No. Now we're going to move on to Jason H via Twitter. Jason is trying to help a friend choose an inexpensive acoustically transparent projection screen. Should he go silver ticket, elite screens, or someone else? So, Rob, what is your go-to for inexpensive acoustically transparent? Because that's a very particular function, the acoustically transparent version.
I'm going to say it depends on what type of frame you want. If you just want a traditional, I'm going to hang it on my wall, fixed frame, then go with silver ticket if you want inexpensive. Their woven screen material is about as good as Elite's. So neither of those I would call the very tip-top of performance. They have a little bit of color shift. If you're closer than about, I would say, 11 feet, you can probably start to see the weave. But pretty darn good. $400 for a 120-inch silver ticket fixed frame
That's a good
screen.
deal.
That's a crazy good deal. Material's good, and I like their frames. Easy to put together. I like the way the frame is, the material is secured to the frame, and you just hang it like a picture on a gigantic.
So it comes as a kit that you put together.
Comes as a kit that you put together. So that's what I would say for that. If you want a roll down or motorized roll down screen, because it didn't say, maybe you do, then your most cost effective solution is going to be Elite for sure. Just make sure you go with their Acoustic Pro UHD fabric. Don't get the Acoustic Pro 1080p3. 3. It isn't nearly as good. Spring for the Acoustic Pro, UHD if you're going with Elite, but I would probably only recommend them if you're going for a roll down or motorized roll down screen. Okay. Now, if you're willing to make your own frame, DIY frame, then why not get the very best acoustically transparent material? And that is from Seymour AV. Get Seymour AVs, because they sell their material. They'll sell it to DIYers. It's right there on their store. Does it just
come on a roll?
Just comes on a roll. Mm-hmm. So if you're building a DIY frame, get the best material. Spend a little bit more because it's not drastically more. Lastly, there is a brand from AV Science themselves. They just call it Screen Science. It's a cool acoustically transparent material because it is like completely textureless. You can get within like a foot of the thing and not see the weave. So it's very cool. Now it's low gain. They rated at 0.8 and measured it's even lower than that. So this is a pretty dim screen. But it would probably mean you want it small and you're sitting very close. That's where this would make sense. I hate the way they secure the material to the frame. It is the worst way of doing it, in my opinion.
What do they do? Twist ties?
It's basically you've got a narrow little channel in the frame and you shove the material in there with a spatula. You will never not have wrinkles. You will always have wrinkles. It's impossible.
You literally
to
go to your kitchen.
Well, they give you a little rolling
and
spatula
get a pancake
thing to put in
flipper.
That why anybody would do it that way is it's the cheapest. But
it's the cheapest.
I hate it. So, but the material's cool. Again, if you're doing DIY and you need to sit very close to the screen and you have a very bright projector, it could be an option, but probably one of the other 3.
So to answer more specifically, we'd need to know a little bit more about the arrangement and what the budget is and that sort of thing.
But you should be able to take that answer and say, that's the type of frame I got, so I'll go with the one that Rob said.
There you go. Well, that was a quick one. Thank you for a quick one, Jason. Paul T. Paul's setup is in his living room. It's a large room with a fair amount of furniture, but being the living room, he has restrictions on where things can be placed, and aesthetics take priority over dedicating the room to sound quality. Hey, that's true for all of our lives. The room has hardwood floors, and he has put absorption panels on his front wall behind his front, left, right, and center speakers. But that's it as far as acoustic treatments go, and adding more is not an option.
All right.
Okay. Maybe you could dress in really fluffy clothes while you watch movies. He currently has a 5.2.2 configuration using Revel Performa 3 speakers all around, plus dual SBS SB16 Ultra subwoofers, all powered by an Onkyo TX RZ810 receiver with a separate 3-channel amp for his front 3 speakers. Guess he wasn't getting enough.
He's got watts.
Yeah. The 2 subs are on his front wall next to his front, left, right speakers, which is wrong. No, he knows that is not what what we would recommend. But for aesthetic reasons, that's his only option. And again, I understand that. Yep. If I get me a couple of subwoofers, I'm pretty sure they're just going to have to go to either side of the couch, and that's just where they're going. I mean, I can move them a little bit, but if I do that, that's just how it's going to have to be. He also cannot cut holes in the ceiling for in-ceiling Atmos speakers. Boy, somebody's been locked down on style. I get it. So here come the questions for that situation. Can his Onkyo RZ810 be expanded to 5.2.4? He thought he saw something in the manual about being able to connect 9 speakers in total. I'm guessing Rob looked at this.
Yeah, the answer is no. You can physically connect 9 speakers to it, but what it will do is switch internally between either the surround backs or whatever you've named as your one pair of overhead speakers. So weirdly, they show it as amplifier assign as 7.2.2. But that is not really the case. You can't actually use it as 7.2.2. You can use it as 7.2 or as 5.2.2, and it will internally switch between them. Also, there's no mention of 5.2.4 anyway, but simple answer is nope, 7 speakers at a time. You can physically connect 9.
So at present, he has rear height speakers. He would like to add overheads at the front of his room. Dolby Atmos enabled upward firing speakers sitting on top of his front towers would be the most convenient, but front heights would also be an option. His ceiling is 10 feet high and flat, so what would be better? Now, I'm curious. He said he can't cut holes in the ceiling for speakers, but can he mount the speaker with a little mount?
I mean, he was talking about front heights, so to me that usually means high up on my front wall.
Right. But can he could he put a couple of, wall anchors up there and hang speakers from the ceiling. I'd be curious to know.
I don't know for sure. 10 feet high, though, he could certainly have them high up on the front wall and get the necessary angle for front height speakers. So, I mean, yeah, I've never heard upward firing ones that sound as good as discrete speakers. So if you have the option, I would go front heights here, actual front heights. That said, well, next question is if you went with upward firing.
Yeah, the next question, if he does go with upward firing Atmos speakers, what would we recommend? Yeah. And you and I, Rob, on a few different of these podcasts have talked about what's going on with those upward firing. I've been kind of curious, kind of interested. And at first I always thought, well, it must be aiming off your ceiling and reflecting, and then you have a different explanation, and it might be a combination of both we've talked about.
Yeah, so I mean, I suspect it's mostly to do with the equalization that's applied when you tell your receiver I have upward firing speakers. It applies a Dolby developed equalization curve to that speaker, which mimics the head related transfer function for what you would hear for sounds coming overhead. And I'm fairly convinced that most of the effect is coming from that equalization and not from sound actually bouncing off your ceiling. But nevertheless, the one speaker company that actually designed upward firing speakers according to Dolby's designs and didn't just put their own special sauce on it like everyone else has done is PSB. PSB's Imagine XA upward firing Atmos speakers follow Dolby's own designs. For that reason, they are a speaker that can be used for nothing but upward firing purposes. This isn't the type of speaker that you could also mount sideways on a wall and use as a traditional speaker, which is probably why a lot of other companies didn't do the actual Dolby design, but they did it. It is the best that I have heard of the upward firing speakers.
So it's basically a wedge of cheese shape with a grill that allows some of the sound to come straight at you that's widely dispersed from these drivers.
From the woofer, but the tweeter is completely encased in foam, basically, and only allowed to fire upward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So see, they must be thinking that it is reflecting off a ceiling. I still think that reflection is part of it.
I have heard them. Up to that point, Klipsch's were the best I had heard. I believe that horn has a lot to do with it. But the PSB Imagine XAs are the best upward firing Dolby Atmos speakers I ever heard in any demos. So if you're going to do upward firing, get those.
What's the price range on those? I didn't even see.
They're about $500 a pair.
Oof, ouch. Okay, but yeah, that's but they're designed to do it.
If you're going to do it, get the good ones. That's right.
Do it right. If he goes with front height speakers, what should he get there? Revel does make on-wall speakers, but they don't come with a pivot mount, so they'd either fire straight down if mounted on the ceiling. Aha, so he can mount.
Well, I put that in there, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. I thought that was his words.
No, I've editorialized.
Right, I got you. All right. So they'd either fire straight down if mounted on the ceiling, or they'd fire straight forward if mounted on the front wall. Is there some other speaker that would sound great along with all the rest of his Revel Performa 3 speakers? And I assume there is, because I see a SVS recommendation.
As front heights, I have zero qualms recommending the SVS Prime elevations to you. And in all honesty, I think that's what you should get. I think you should get some prime elevation speakers, mount them on your front wall. Their included angle that's built right into them is perfect. When they're mounted high up on your front wall is your front height speakers, and you're done.
There you go. Well, boy, that's a very specific, confident recommendation. A lot of times we hedge, but not there. SVS Prime Elevation, get it.
Yep.
Given that he cannot reposition his dual subs and he cannot add more room treatments and he's not allowed to leave the house. Oh, wait, that doesn't say that. Is the AccuEQ correction provided by his Onkyo receiver enough? Should he just get a new receiver? Would Odyssey XT32 or Anthem room correction be enough? Or should he consider a mini DSP and learning to use Room EQ Wizard? Or what about the mini DSP with Dirac? So that's a lot of questions. He has listened to all the various ways this can be done.
Yes. Now, what I would say is if you are set on doing a 5.2.4 setup, you're going to have to get a new AV receiver. Your current one can't do 5.2.4. It can't do 4 overhead speakers. It's stuck at 2. So you're going to have to get a new one. Now, what I would actually say in your specific case is begin by with the multi-sub optimizer software. You're going to want to, so you're going to need Room EQ Wizard and a measurement microphone of some sort to go along with that. But you're going to take your measurements and you're going to use that multi-sub optimizer software because it can spit out recommendations for the equalization and the settings for each sub individually. And with your SVS subs, they actually have quite a bit of capability built into the subwoofers themselves, right? You can do individual phase and volume, of course, but then you can also set 3 EQ bands for each sub within the sub itself. You haven't added anything else. And I suspect that with the capabilities of what's built into your subs themselves and taking the recommendations of the multi-sub optimizer software, that you'll be able to do it without any external equipment. What you're aiming for there is to get uniform bass response from that. And then you'll just run whatever room correction is in your new AV receiver, telling your new AV receiver that you actually only have one sub. You only want a mono subwoofer output from your new AV receiver, but it's going to go into the subs that have now been themselves adjusted to produce as uniform bass as you can get with your restricted placement based on the recommendations of the multi-sub optimizer software. And that's the way I would come at this. So is AccuEQ enough on its own? Nope. Is Odyssey XT32 going to be enough on its own? Probably not. Same with any of the room correction systems, honestly, including Dirac. So instead of adding external equipment to it, I would do it this way. Use what's built into the subs you already have, because they can do a lot.
I did not realize that was there. Yeah. We are moving on to another question from Eddie via Twitter. Which one would we pick of the following? The Marantz SR8012 or the Arcam AVR850? Based on what now? See, which one would we pick? It depends.
It was Twitter, and that's all he wrote.
And that's all we got.
So
we need a little more info,
So, I mean, my answer is neither. I would not get either of those because. So we're dealing with, so in the case of the SR8012, that's about a $3,500 AV receiver. Retail, and the Arcam is a $6,000 AV receiver. Now, the 8012 has 11 amplifiers built into it, so it can power a full 7.2.4 system by itself if you want to. The Arcam AVR 850 can process 11 speakers, but it only has 7 amplifiers built in, so you must add 4 channels of external amplification if you want a full 11 speaker system. So right away, the Arcam is considerably more expensive, way more expensive. Now, why would you consider it? Yeah. Why would you consider it? Well, because the major feature difference is that it has Dirac room correction, whereas, of course, the Marantz has Odyssey Multi-Q XT32. Now, let's suppose, sticking with these two, not even going to my real recommendation, but sticking with these two, let's suppose you just gotta have Dirac. All right?
First of all, why? But okay.
But maybe that's just what's in your head. You can get from Mini DSP their 8-channel external Dirac box. Now, it's 8 channels for $1,000, but you could add 2 of them to the SR8012, at which point you're still about $500 below the starting price of the AVR850. Now, you would then need 11 channels of amplification, but you need 4 channels of amplification on the AVR850. So by the end of it all, you're probably at a very similar price point. So by itself, having Dirac built in isn't enough for me to convince me that that's what you want to do. And the Arcam, I'm sorry, but using that thing on a day-to-day basis, doesn't have any Wi-Fi. The remote is weird as all get out. I don't know who designed that remote. Basically doesn't have a very nice user interface.
Right.
So using it on a day-to-day basis, the Marantz wins hands down. Now, let's get to my real recommendation, because I wouldn't buy either of those. Let's say you want external amplification. Cool. Let's say you want Dirac. Okay. You could get 2 of the 8-channel Mini DSP external Dirac boxes, 11 channels of amplification, and add them all to a Denon X4500H for way less than what the Arcam would cost you.
It'll be a lot less.
Way less, thousands less, couple $1,000s less. Or, of course, my real recommendation is to get an X4500H and just add a minimum of 2 channels of amplification to it for, well, like less than the price of the SR8012 by itself, right? So
that's right. So all these like smaller sort of audiophile solutions that are always so much more expensive, they never have the features because they're smaller companies. They don't have the engineers and the software developers to write and to add these features. They just have the very basics.
to get the Marantz SR8012, the reason you might get that is because it does have the beefed up power supply. But I'm like, but that beefed up power supply built in that receiver is not as powerful as a nice external Outlaw amplifier.
Right.
So, and like, get a 5-channel or a 7-channel. I will guarantee you the X4500H can power your 4 Atmos speakers on its own. It's not going to have a problem powering those. So, get a 7-channel amp, something like that. So that's my real recommendation. The last thing that I'll mention is we haven't seen the X4600 or the X6600 announced yet. And normally we see those announced around the same time that the 3600 just came out. Well, the Denon 3600 is now an 11-channel receiver. It's got 9 amps built in and can process 11. First time they've done that for under $1,000 now, right? I'm like, so what are you going to do in the 4600 to differentiate it? Because that's what the 4600 used to, what the 4500 used to offer over the 3500. I am convinced, since we haven't seen them announced yet, that they are waiting for HDMI 2.1. I strongly suspect, this is just a suspect on my part, I don't have any information, but I suspect the 4600 and the 6600 will be the first AV receivers widely available with HDMI 2.1 switching, and they're waiting for that. That's what I suspect.
Sounds right. Sounds very likely. All right, we're going to move on to another question. BNC PhD on Twitter.
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I just had your Twitter handle.
Bunkford on Twitter. KEF posted an article on their blog describing how to calculate the proper height for your TV. Do we agree with their method?
Nope.
The proper height for your TV.
Yeah. Yeah, how high on your wall should you mount your TV? That's fair enough.
I think when you, to me, it's really simple. Where are you sitting? Whenever you sit down, I kind of like the middle of the screen wherever my eyeballs are. As far as height.
Pretty much. I mean
that's pretty much
so
what
I always go by, figure out your resting eye line, because some of us are in reclining seats all the time, and our resting eye line actually is up a little bit, right? It's not literally parallel to the ground all the time.
Okay, I'll give you that. You're right.
So figure out where your resting eye line is, right? And then, I mean, I more or less agree. So the traditional rule of thumb is that your resting eye line should intersect either the middle of the TV screen vertically or as much as, let's see, 1/3 up from the bottom.
Sure.
So that would mean more of the TV is above your resting eye line and less of the screen is below your resting eye line. So 1/3. So somewhere between 1/3 from the bottom of the screen to the middle of the screen. That's sort of the basic rule of thumb. Now, THX has a very simple recommendation, which is figure out your resting eye line, and then the top of the screen should be 15 degrees above that.
Okay,
right?
I would go along with that. That's probably pretty close to what I do. I just did what was comfortable for me. I say what I did. What I mean, I actually designed and got some help building my own TV stand because I couldn't find one that was the right height, width, depth, had the right place for a center channel speaker.
Right.
At the time we built it, I couldn't find anything nice that had a place for the center. And now finally they're starting to do that. But I wanted exactly the right height. I didn't want it too high. I like things a little lower.
Now, I mean, the way Kef went about it is they said, and I mean, they're not complete. The methodology was okay, which is figure out your distance from your eyes to your screen. Yeah. Based on that, figure out the field of view that you want to fill. And they quoted the SEMPTE recommendation, which is a 30-degree field of view, which was for HD TV. They also quoted the, movie size of 36-degree field of view, which is out there. THX has recommended that. But I'm like, for actual movies, I want more than a 36-degree field of view.
If I can get it, yes.
In my case, I like as much as a 45-degree field of view, which is significantly more. So they only talked about 30 to 36, and then they seemed to do everything they could possibly do to avoid really simple trigonometry. Because when you're dealing with angles, you're talking about a little bit of trigonometry, but all you're talking about in this case is pressing the tangent button on your calculator. Like, it's really not that. This is not advanced trigonometry, all right? One tangent button press on your calculator. But they seem to do everything they could to avoid that, and so they just converted it all to multiplication, and the numbers didn't even actually come out to the correct numbers. So that's why I can't agree with what they quoted, because they didn't even list the correct numbers. I'm like, come on,
basically,
guys.
They can't do math.
Seemingly. I mean, that was some really
I don't know
really
what
general rounding.
I don't know what my degree is. I know I have a 65-inch TV, and in my head, my face is probably 9 feet away from it.
That's fairly small then. That's fairly small.
Yeah, it's not too much.
You just calculate the width of your television, take half of the width of your TV, divide that by the distance from the TV to your eyes, and then take the inverse tangent of that. There you go.
Okay, I'll go do that. I'll be right back.
Click a couple of button clicks on a calculator. Simple trigonometry. But regardless, you don't have to really follow that if you can do really basic trigonometry. I like THX's recommendation, which is, whatever your screen size is, put the top of the screen 15 degrees above your resting eye line, or just line up the middle of your screen vertically with your resting eye line. Even easier.
There you go. That's it. All right. Now, the next question apparently has something to do with me, because it says time to pick Lee's brain. I remember you telling me about this ahead of time, that last week, Infinite Gary asked what his neighbors should do. She's moving to a new home where she won't have cable TV service, but she has lots of standard def recordings on her current DVR. So what's the best way for her to keep those and be able to watch them at her new place?
There is no one better to ask, in my opinion, than Lee Overstreet. So.
Okay, I'll go along with that. There are people that know even more, but boy, there's a lot of it depends going on here. How precious are these recordings? How important is the image quality? How perfect do you need it to be? Because I'm going to tell you, probably the simplest thing, and that would make 90% of people happy, is to find a decent working used DVD recorder and get you some DVD-Rs.
Yes.
And copy off those programs one at a time. Be sure to finalize those discs, finalize them in whatever system or whatever you choose, maybe a little Pioneer DVD recorder, something like that. That, honest to goodness, is the easiest. And then everybody's got some sort of disc player.
Now, I mean, so Tom and I were correct that if you do that, and I was saying how actually Walmart.com still sells DVD recorders. Is one of the few places that does. And they had a Toshiba that was like $250 or something like that. And
you don't even need to spend that much, I don't think.
It seemed like you did, though.
Well, I just mean you can find them used. People sell them.
Okay.
Now, granted, little risky. Sometimes they don't work right, but I'd go with that. But if you're going to do it a lot, or I'd probably sell it again after that. There's not a lot of use for standard def DVD recording nowadays.
But so we were right in saying that you'd be making those recordings just in real time off of the analog output, right? That's
no matter what you do, that's how it's coming off.
Okay.
Because I don't think, like back in the day, back in the 2000s, DVRs were less locked down. And I actually made recordings from the FireWire output and got actual copies of the data off the DVR. Nowadays, all the cable companies like Comcast decided to lock that down for anything that was already recorded. My FireWire output, I believe, is still live. If I have some way to record live, if I hook up a computer with software that emulates a digital VHS VCR from back in the day, I can record the stream coming off the FireWire output. But then you got to deal with weird software and FireWire. And for standard def recordings, you're not going to lose much. And it's just easier for everyone to understand to record, to just, you kind of have to get ready and hit record, take it off pause. It's like making an old mixtape back in the day. I would use the highest quality setting. And it's on your DVD recorder, whatever it is, and that's probably going to work fine. Now, if you want to get more detailed, if you need that picture quality to be preserved, there's something special about these recordings, and you want them to look perfectly pristine, and you want to use them in a variety of situations across different devices, and you want to put them on a tablet to carry in the car or something, then you're going to want to get a doohickey.
That's the technical term. Yeah,
that's right. And Rob and I did an entire podcast about this, how to preserve specifically old home VHS and 8mm videotape recordings. And, then back then, and I still recommend the same device for most people. It's the Diamond VC500 doohickey. It's a dongle with standard def inputs, the old S-video that everybody forgets about, and the old composite, that yellow cable that everybody remembers, and a stereo left-right. It's got those inputs, and it converts it via USB to a piece of software that you can use to record that. And without getting nuts into how you perfectly preserve the interlace signal, and then maybe you de-interlace, and I tend to go for a 60 frame per second because I don't like messing up the motion and the fluid movement of TV and so forth. Maybe you have, God forbid, you have a 24 FPS movie recorded in standard def, and you want to preserve the 24 frame per second.
Standard def cable, I'm doubting that. I'm betting it's 60i.
It's probably going to be programs that, like for instance, in the past I've saved a lot of news programs where I recorded live events and stuff back in the day. And I'm telling you, probably the easiest for most people, DVD recorder. Okay. Or if you want to get fancier and experiment more with how to digitize it onto your computer, that Diamond VC500 is a neato doohickey. It's only $30-some. You're hardly risking anything. So trying that with almost any computer, all it needs is a USB 2.0.
Right.
So you're talking standard def.
Either way, it will require time. You can't just somehow easily copy the hard drive like you would, on a
not anymore. I'm not even going to go into how that might be possible.
No, not worth
but
it.
But it's really not. No matter what you do, real time. So if you have 16 hours of footage, it's going to take you more than 16 hours to do this. Yeah. And that's just how it is. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, there it is from the man himself. I feel more confident in the answer provided now. Thank you.
There you go. All right. Dan C. Dan has a pair of ELAC debut towers as his front left right, but his TV is mounted over his fireplace way up high, and he didn't have the physical space for the matching center speaker. Mm-hmm. He tried using the very slim Bose center speaker, but he hated it. And he, of course, because it's Bose. Yeah. So immediately he can tell the problem. It stands for Bring Other Sound Equipment, right? BOSE. And he's tried running a Phantom center, which is better than the Bose. Yes, no speaker is better than a Bose speaker. I agree 100%. But he'd still like to have a dedicated center speaker, since this is a living room setup with the back opening up to the kitchen. And not everyone is always sitting in between the front, left, right speakers for a good Phantom center image. Mm-hmm. If there is something slim that could be mounted below his fireplace mantle or on the front wall, that's what he's hoping for. Suggestions. And it looks like Rob has come up with the JBL
Absolutely,
solution.
Yes. Thankfully, JBL's relatively new Arena series has a very cool center speaker as part of the lineup. It's called the A135C. Now, they stuck 6 3-inch drivers along here to give themselves the surface area of essentially the equivalent of 2 5.25-inch drivers. So we're not talking like a crazy speaker or anything like that, but it's about 4 inches tall.
4 inches tall, okay.
That's about as slim as I can come across for an actually good speaker, right?
Yeah, okay.
We don't want to
be perfectly designed for exactly this scenario.
Yeah, we don't want to compromise to the point that it's pointless in getting this. It goes for about $200, so it's not ridiculously expensive. It is actually still a ported design, but the ports are on the sides. Okay. And around back, it's got keyhole mounts right there. So very easy to either just, use a traditional keyhole mount flush on the wall, or of course, you can use the keyhole mounts to attach it to just about any type of, if you have one of those things that hangs down from a traditional TV stand, a traditional TV wall mount, that's meant for mounting a sound bar or something like that. This would absolutely work with that. So,
So, it looks like a sound bar, and that seems perfect.
Yep.
Okay, well, that was an easy one.
It was.
Moving on to our next question from Zach R. First, an update. Zach has the Denon X4300H receiver with the non-functioning network hardware. As we suggested, he called Denon, but they said they're unable to provide any free service as he is outside of his warranty. We're not sure if Zach heard last week's episode and Chris M's clever reminder to check if your credit card company offers automatic extended warranty coverage. A local repair shop said they charge $75 just to look at it and provide an estimate, so he isn't sure he wants to spend that money. I would not.
If you're not using the features of the network connection, then I'd probably leave it alone for the time being.
And there's other ways to do things across your network.
I mean, Lord knows with all the stuff coming out, like HDMI 2.1, for example, the chances of you upgrading your receiver in the not ridiculously far future.
Sure.
Yep.
New question. He has an 11-year-old 67-inch Samsung DLP rear projection TV.
I remember
how about
those.
that?
I remember those. The
big old thing.
The blue color on those was ridiculous because they did not have good color accuracy, but I remember those.
And it just, the size of this thing. It has some stuck mirrors now, and it is very dim at this point. Yes, it is dying. It's the end of days.
Well, the lamp is anyway, but yeah, the stuck mirrors is a problem. Ain't nothing you can do about that.
No, you're not fixing that. So he wants a new TV in the 65 to 75 inch size range. He'd love to get an OLED. Yes, but he doesn't think he can afford one, okay? He wants good black levels and support for as many HDR formats as possible. So what TV would we recommend to him? And will his X4300H be able to pass through all the HDR signals? Or would this be an opportune time to say he needs a new AV receiver too? And that word "needs," boy, is in all caps. I don't know if that's your editorializing.
No, that was my editorializing.
That's
but
your
I was putting the pieces together and going, okay, I have this non-functioning network connection. Could I use this as an excuse? So if that is as I suspected, Zach, what you were thinking, you can't use this as the excuse. The X4300H will pass through all the HDR formats.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't need that network function, or if you don't mind buying, again, a doohickey to do networking of some sort, then your receiver's probably fine. And are you sure you can't, if you can't afford the OLED? Because I got mine for about $2,000.
Well, that's
right
just
at 2,000.
Yeah,
and mine's a 65 inch, and he said he's looking 65 to 75.
That's right. So if you were thinking much more along the lines of the 75, then I agree the 77-inch OLED, even if you're going back about a year or two. Well, I mean, you can find them for down to about $4,500 now.
That's still more than twice as much as a 65 brand new. So.
Exactly. That's still,
to me, that's way out of range.
Well, compared to the $10,000 when they came out is what I mean, though.
Right.
Within 2 years, they're gone from $10,000 to $4,500. So that's pretty cool. But
I just noticed a new one yesterday. I was actually walking into a Best Buy because my wife was in a different store next door, and it seemed like it was in the 5,000, 5,100 range for what I saw.
For a 77-inch?
Maybe I was looking at the Soda. Yeah, I think that was a 77-inch.
Well, in Best Buy right now, the 77-inch C9 is listed at $5,500.
Okay, there you go.
So it could definitely be, So the 77-inch OLED probably not. But like Lee says, 65-inch OLED. Like if you're willing to go back one model year to a C8 or a B8 especially, you can get I saw a B8 going for I think $1,650.
Whoa. Okay.
So if that's the type of price range, then 65 inches will do you. OLED isn't necessarily out of price range. Now, he didn't say what his price range was, so I'm taking some guesses here. But so that's the one thing. If around, so let's call it like $1,800, because you can definitely find a 65-inch OLED for $1,800 these days. So if that is either A, not really as big as you wanted, or B, not cheap enough, I focused on 75-inch LCDs because, in my opinion, for the prices you can find, if you're going to do LCD instead of OLED, you might as well get the bigger size because you totally could, right?
That's true. So, I was just thinking one of the things he said was he wants good black levels, and you're not going to beat an OLED. So.
You're not going to beat an OLED, but you can get the full array local dimming with lots of zones, and you can get pretty darn amazing stuff in a 75-inch size from an LCD these days. So starting at the low end of the price range, I'm going to mention, of course, TCL's 6 series. It'd be like the R615, which is still available from Best Buy for $1,300 for a 75-inch. That's got Dolby Vision. I'm just not a
fan of the TCL.
I know, but you saw the S415 series. You didn't look at the 6 series, and the 6 series is different. It's got the full array local dimming, Dolby Vision, HDR10, pretty darn amazing. It is a 60 hertz panel, though. It is not a 120 hertz panel. It's a 60 hertz panel, but still has low input lag if you're a gamer. But $1,300 for 75 inches is the reason this is on this list, because that's
cheap,
pretty tough to beat for that size. Now, I want to mention specifically one that's still available. I only see it on Amazon for wide availability, but I want to make sure I mention it, which is, this is going all the way back to ancient times in 2017 that this came out. I don't know if you can remember back that long, but it's still...
All TVs were black and white back then. It was crazy.
It still does Dolby Vision, HDR10, has remarkable black levels for an LCD. It is Sony's 75-inch X940E. The X940E only came in one size, 75 inches, but it was basically the Z9D from 2016 minus 3D for like less than half the price.
There you go.
And you can get that 75-inch X940E from Amazon for $2,000 right now.
Wow. All right.
So
yeah, I like a Sony LCD.
And it's a tremendous television. Like, it's as good as LCD gets. And 75-inch size for about the same price as a 65-inch OLED. So that's one to consider. Now, of course, there are the alternatives. These are all 75 inches that I'm talking about, like Vizio's P series, about $1,600 for the 75-incher. Now, the new 2019 P series Quantum, $200 more, $1,800 for the 75-incher, or the Quantum X, which is their like 270-something odd local dimming zones, $2,200. And then one of my favorites as far as performance goes for a new model is Sony's X900F, but that's, depending on where you shop, between $2,100 and $2,500. And honestly, I would get the X940E before the X900F, so get the X940E. So basically, get an OLED or that X940E, but if you need the price to be closer to $1,000 than $2,000, that TCL 6 series pretty much can't be beat.
There you go. There's a lot of options. It just depends on what your priority is, what the budget is.
Yep.
Are you dying for the bigger screen?
So we have hit a couple of hours here. Lee, if you need to go, that's okay. If you don't need to go, that's okay.
Can we do one more?
One more sounds perfect.
How about we do one more? And then we'll get on out of here.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So our one more question is from Francis A. via Facebook. Francis has an Epson TW6100 projector. He keeps it in eco lamp mode because any higher lamp mode results in too much fan noise. So he's looking for a projector under $1,500 that is quiet. Oh, I feel you. I hate when electronics are loud, like a computer, a CPU fan, or a fan on a projector. Ooh, I hate it. He needs to have lens shift, and he's a 3D fan, so he wants 3D. It doesn't need to be 4K. He'd be fine with 1080p. Okay, interesting. So what can we suggest? And I believe there is an Epson suggestion coming up right about now.
Yep. So first of all, take a peek at his room if you're looking on YouTube. These are white walls, white ceiling. All right. Up at the front of the room, he's actually got this, highly colored striped wall, and then he's got a pull-down projection screen that comes down in front of his flat panel that's on a traditional TV stand. Okay. So this is my point being, this isn't a bat cave of a room. All right. So I'm not concerned with having the absolute blackest black levels because there's going to be, like, just from the light reflecting around these white walls and white ceiling, there's going to be some washout of the screen regardless. So the absolute blackest black levels are not my concern here. That being the case, if you hop over to Epson's clearance center, because if you're shopping for brand new, the model I'm about to mention goes for about $1,700, which isn't like insanely more expensive than the budget said. But if you shop at the clearance center, you can get, this is a discontinued model now, which is why it's at the clearance center, the Home Cinema 4000. All right. Now that has now been replaced by the Home Cinema 4010. I think that's been the replacement model. They only ticked up the number by 10. But the Home Cinema 4000 from a couple of years ago, you can find for $1,225 at Epson's clearance center. Fits the price. Now, what's cool here is this will take a 4K HDR signal.
Okay.
It's a 1080p panel, but they do the thing where they wobble the panel.
Okay.
And it'll accept a 4K HDR signal. Now, it will not take 4K HDR at 60 frames a second. It is limited if you're doing 4K HDR to 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second.
But that'll get you Blu-ray movies.
It'll do the movies just fine. If you're a 4K HDR gamer, then you won't be able to do that with this account. 4K HDR at 60. You could set your Xbox One X to output 1080p at 60 with HDR, though, and that would work.
Okay.
That would work.
This does sound quite appropriate for what he said. He said it doesn't need to be 4K.
It doesn't need to be.
The little 4K bonus.
And yet it can still do it, and critically, you can do wide color and HDR. It is the 5040 UB minus the ultra black levels. That's what the 4000 is. But like I said, I'm not worried about the ultra black levels in this room. And now it fits the price, and it does an amazing feature set. Also, in its high lamp mode, it's about as loud as your current eco lamp mode on your 6100.
Really? Okay, so that's the key.
So it is definitely quieter.
I feel him on that so much. Oh, I just hate when things are noisy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially in a home theater.
Yeah. Now, if you're like, there's no way, no how I'm buying another Epson, or there's no way, no how I'm shopping at the clearance center, or there's no way, no how I'm paying $200 more to get a brand new one for $1,700, you can find for right around $1,500 Sony's HW45ES. It is a 1080p projector. It doesn't do 4K. It doesn't do HDR. It is whisper quiet.
Okay.
It definitely fits that. It is most places $1,550 right now, so it's maybe $50 over the budget that you said, but I'm thinking that's close enough.
Yeah, in their description, they purposely brag about the quiet
and
fan
noise. It is whisper quiet.
Right.
Nice black case, lots of lens shift, zoom range, a wonderful 1080p projector, low input lag if you are a gamer, and both the Epson 4000 and the HW45ES from Sony do 3D, so some way between those two, we've checked all the boxes.
I feel like this is yet another very specific, successfully specific recommendation.
I hope so.
I think so.
I'd be happy with either of those, but yeah, there
I
we
would
go.
just do what Rob says. Everyone just do what Rob says.
Ignore my advice at your peril. There you go.
That's right. You see what's happening. People write in later going, well, I didn't like what I decided. I should have done what you said. See?
No, he's sticking to his guns. Going back up. But anyway, Rob W is on our list for, we'll be answering Rob W next week.
Right.
And that was it for our list. We didn't have a huge number of questions, but some of these questions had multiple parts and were quite long.
We stayed in Damien's basement for a while.
We did indeed. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another
proves,
episode.
By the way, that when you ask a question, we answer that question.
Yep. First
you get
in,
an
first
answer
out.
to all of that question. So send the questions in,
That's
everybody.
what we do here. Indeed.
One left over next week.
It is question@avrant.com to send in your questions. Please use our email, question@avrant.com. Lee Overstreet, thank you so much for guest hosting.
Well, thank you for calling me again. I love this every time. Maybe next week the hurricane will be slightly farther up the Florida coast. Maybe it'll be at Jacksonville next week. And then
I hope not.
Maybe by Christmas, it'll be somewhere near South Carolina. It just seems to be going so slow.
It does, yeah, apparently.
Go away.
Very slow moving. A little decreased in severity, so that's good news. But regardless, once again, want to thank our listeners of the week over at patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. You can sign up to be an automatic monthly donor. We have 86 patrons over there, so thank you so much for all that financial support. If you'd like to do a one-time donation via PayPal, either using your PayPal account, or if you don't want to sign up with them, you can just use your credit card without signing up for them. Come to avrant.com, our website, and over on the right-hand side, it says Support AVRant, and that takes you to PayPal. Those are the financial ways to support us, but Carlton B., he's been helping out Tom and Clint, figuring out our avrant.com website bandwidth issues, so thanks very much for that support, Carlton. And Terry G. talked us up to SVS because he hit them up for their Labor Day sale and got himself a PC 2000, so congrats, Terry.
There is
thank you.
One other financial support possibility. Don't forget, you can drive a truck full of money to my house.
We've also had people send us Amazon gift cards just via email, so that works.
That's true, actually, yeah. And I always feel I don't know why, I feel like guilty, like I didn't do anything that great, but thank you. Yes. But I have enjoyed a couple of times.
That is fantastic.
Distributing those.
We will absolutely take that. So
that's right.
Yes, very good. Thinking of Tom. Hope you're staying safe. Hopefully Tom is back next week. Lee, thank you once again. And therefore, on behalf of Lee and Tom Andry, I am Rob H. This has been AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.